What's going on, guys? So I finally figured it out. I finally figured out what I need to do so we can read holes. Woo! We are on chapter 27. If we were on a different spot, I'm not entirely sure, but we're just going to pick up from 27 from right here. I'll hold it up. 2, that's a 7. Alright. I'm just going to start reading it. Like I said when we talked in class the last time, if you need to just put this in headphones if you want to pull it up on your phone and leave it sitting there and watch some TV. If you want to be doing some other homework while you're listening to this, that's fine. It's just going to be me reading holes. We just have chapter 27 and then chapter 28, and then we start part 2. All right. So my best guess is that we'll probably get through this video in like 20 or so minutes maybe. I'm just going to read the 2 chapters. I'm going to try and keep it short on these videos for loading and getting things up to everybody. But other than that, here we go. Stanley dug his shovel into the ground. His hole was about 3.5 feet deep in the center. He grunted as he pried up some dirt, then flung it off to the side. All right, there we go. The sun was almost directly overhead. He glanced at his canteen lying beside his hole. He knew it was half full, but he didn't take a drink just yet. He had to drink sparingly. This is terrible lighting. Let me start over. There we go. He had to drink sparingly because he didn't know who would be driving the water truck the next time it came. 3 days had passed since the warden had scratched Mr. Sir. Every time Mr. Sir delivered water, he poured Stanley straight onto the ground. Fortunately, Mr. Bedinsky delivered the water more often than Mr. Sir. Mr. Bedinsky was obviously aware that Mr. Sir was how he was doing, because he always gave Stanley a little extra. He'd fill Stanley's canteen, then let Stanley take a long drink, then top it off for him. It helped, too, that Zero was digging some of Stanley's hole for him, although as Stanley had expected, the other boys didn't like to see Stanley sitting around while they were working. They say things like, "Who died and made you king?" Or, "It must have been nice to have your own personal slave." Then he tried pointing out that he was the one who took the blame for the sunflower seeds. The other boys said it was his fault because he was the one who spilled them. If you remember when they were throwing the sunflower seeds too, he threw them up. Magnet stole them, threw them up around everybody, and then once Zigzag finally threw them to Stanley, they were open and in a bad spot, and Stanley dropped them. Stanley had also tried to explain that he needed to save his energy so he could teach Zero how to read, but the other boys just mocked him. "Same old story, ain't it, Armpit?" X-Ray had said. "The white boy sits around while the black boy does all the work." "Ain't that right, Caveman?" "No, that's not right," Stanley replied. "No, it ain't," X-Ray agreed. "It ain't right at all." Stanley dug out another shovel full of dirt. He knew X-Ray wouldn't have been talking like that if he was the one teaching Zero to read. Then X-Ray would be talking about how important it was that he got his rest, so he could be a better teacher, right? And that was true. He did need to save his strength so he could be a better teacher, although Zero was a quick learner. Sometimes, in fact, Stanley hoped the warden was watching them with her secret cameras and microphones so she'd know that Zero wasn't as stupid as everyone thought. From across the lake, he could see the approaching dust cloud. He took a drink from his canteen, then waited to see who was driving the truck. The swelling on Mr. Sir's face had gone down, but it was still a little puffy. There had been 3 scratch marks down his cheek. 2 of them marks had faded, but the middle scratch must have been the deepest because it still remained. It was a jagged purple line running from below his eyes, so below his mouth, like a tattoo of a scar. Stanley waited in line, then handed him his canteen. Mr. Sir held it up to his ear and shook it. He smiled at the swishing around. Stanley hoped he wouldn't dump it out. To his surprise, Mr. Sir held the canteen under the stream, filled it with water. "Wait here," he said. Still holding Stanley's canteen, Mr. Sir walked past him, then went around the side of the truck and into the cab where he couldn't see. "What's he doing there?" asked Zero. "I wish I knew," asked Stanley. A short while later, Mr. Sir came out of the truck and handed Stanley his canteen. It was still full. "Thank you, Mr. Sir," Stanley said, confused. Mr. Sir smiled at him. "What are you waiting for?" he asked. "Drink up." He popped some sunflower seeds into his mouth, chewed, and spit out the shells. Stanley was afraid to drink it. He hated to think of what kind of vile substance Mr. Sir might have put in it. He brought the canteen back to his hole. For a long time, he left it beside his hole and continued to dig. Then, when he was so thirsty that he could hardly stand anymore, he unscrewed the cap, turned the canteen over, and poured it all onto the dirt. He was afraid that if he waited another second, he might have taken a drink. He was afraid Mr. Sir poisoned the water. After Stanley taught Zero the final 6 letters of the alphabet, he taught him to write his name. Capital Z-E-R-O. Zero wrote the letters as Stanley said them. Zero. he said, looking at a piece of paper. His smile was too big for his face. Stanley watched him write it over and over and over again, just zero after zero after zero. In a way, it made him sad. He couldn't help but think that 100 times zero was still nothing. You know, that's not my real name, Zero said as they headed to the rec room for dinner. Well, yeah, Stanley said. I guess I knew that. He had never really been sure. Everyone's always called me Zero, even before I came here. Oh, okay. My real name is Hector. Hector, Stanley repeated. Yeah, Hector Zeroni. Chapter 28. After 20 years, Kate Barlow returned to Green Lake. It was a place where nobody would ever find her, a ghost town on a ghost lake. The peach trees had all died, but there were a couple of small oak trees still growing by an old abandoned cabin. The cabin used to be on the eastern shore of the lake. Now the edge of the lake was over 5 miles away, and was a little more than a small pond of full, dirty water. She lived in the cabin. Sometimes she could hear Sam's voice echoing across the emptiness. Onions! Sweet, fresh onions! She knew she was crazy. She knew she'd been crazy for the last 20 years. Oh, Sam, she would say, speaking into the vast emptiness. I know it is hot, but it feels so very cold. My hands are cold. My feet are cold. My face is cold. But most of all, my heart is cold. And sometimes she would hear him say, I can fix that. And she'd feel his warm arms across her shoulder. She'd been living in the cabin about 3 months when she had awakened one morning by someone kicking open the cabin door. She opened her eyes to see the blurry end of a rifle 2 inches from her nose. She could smell Trout Walker's dirty feet. You've got exactly 10 seconds to tell me where you've hidden your loot, said Trout, or else I'll blow your head off. Kate Barlow yawned. A red-headed woman was there with Trout. Kate could see her rummaging through the cabin, dumping drawers and knocking things from the shelves of cabinets. The woman came to her. Where is it? She demanded. Linda Miller, asked Kate. Is that you? Linda Miller had been in the 4th grade when Kate Barlow was still a teacher. She had been a cute, freckle-faced girl with beautiful red hair. Now her face was blotchy, and her hair was dirty and scraggly. It's Linda Walker now, said Trout. Oh, Linda, I'm so sorry, said Kate. Trout jabbed her throat with the rifle. Where's the loot? There is no loot, said Kate. Don't give me that, shouted Trout. You've robbed every bank from here to Houston. You better tell him, said Linda. We're desperate. You married him for his money, didn't you? Asked Kate. Linda nodded. But it's all gone. It dried up with the lake. The peach trees, the livestock, I kept thinking, it has to rain soon. The drought can't last forever, but it just kept getting hotter and hotter and even hotter. Her eyes fixed on the shovel, which was leaning against the fireplace. She's buried it, she declared. I don't know what you're talking about, said Kate. There was a loud blast as Trout fired his rifle just above her head. The window behind her shuddered. Where's it buried? He demanded. Go ahead and kill me, Trout, said Kate. But I sure hope you like to dig, 'cause you're going to be digging for a long time. It's a big, vast wasteland out there. You and your children and their children can dig for the next 100 years, and you'll never find it. Linda grabbed Kate's hair and jerked her head back. Oh, we're not going to kill you, she said. But by the time we're finished with you, you're going to wish you were dead. Kate Barlow stared at her, quickly replied, I've been wishing I was dead for the last 20 years. Everyone stared silently. They dragged her out of bed and pushed her outside. She wore bulk silk pajamas. Her turquoise stubbed black boots remained beside her bed. They loosely tied her legs together so she could walk, but she couldn't run. They made her walk barefoot on the hot ground. They wouldn't let her stop walking. Not until you take us to the loot, said Trout. Linda hit Kate on the back of the legs with her shovel. You're going to take us sooner or later, so you might as well make it sooner. She walked one way, then the other, until her feet were black and blistered. Whenever she stopped, Linda whacked her with the shovel. I'm losing my patience, warned Trout. She felt the shovel jab into her back and fell onto the dirt. Get up, ordered Linda. Kate struggled to her feet. We're being easy on you today, said Trout. It's just going to keep getting worse and worse for you until you take us to it. Look out, shouted Linda. A lizard leaped toward them. Kate could see its big red eyes. Linda tried to hit it with the shovel and Trout shot at it, but they both missed. The lizard landed on Kate Barlow's ankle. Its sharp, black teeth bit into her leg. Its white tongue lapped up the droplets of blood that leaked out of the wound. Kate smiled. There was nothing they could do to her any more. Start digging, she said. Where's it at? Linda screeched. Where'd you bury it? Trout demanded. Kate Barlow started laughing. From there, Kate Barlow died laughing. Right on. Okay, so we're going to be on part 2 now. That'll be chapter 29, part 2, just so you can see it. We're almost there. So first things first, if you remember in the movie, right, that is different. The movie is different. She is just sitting by the boat where you end up seeing Stanley and Zero sitting later on in the movie. But in the book right there, it talks about how she died from being in her house, and Trout Walker and Linda came and found her at the house and things like that. So make sure you're listening to these differences that are different between the movie. Do your absolute best. Replay this, listen to this over. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure you can listen to it, and then there will be some comprehension questions posted later this week. Right on, guys.